Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Understanding the Impact of Nutrition on Nursery Pig Health, made possible by Zinpro and Swine. I'm Dr. Clayton Johnson, Director of Veterinary Services at Carthage Veterinary Service, and I'm your host for today. Now, as we know, profitable and successful pig production, especially in the nursery, is only possible when swine nutritionists, veterinarians, producers, managers, caregivers, and everyone else involved in the production system work together. In a world with skyrocketing inflation and corresponding skyrocketing feed ingredient prices, optimizing your nutrition program has never been so important. Using that collaborative approach, it's time to learn how swine nutrition and health meets, specifically in the nursery phase. The next hour will be filled with great insights from Doctors Gabler and Kramer, two brilliant minds in the swine industry with great and very diverse experience to share. I'm excited to hear from them, and I'm sure you are as well. For those in the audience, please feel free to participate via the chat function. You can interact with us via that chat at any point in the webinar, and we'll be happy to direct your questions to our guests through the Q&A section at the end after we get done with these presentations. Let's get started with our first presentation with Dr. Nick Gabler. Dr. Nick Gabler obtained his Bachelor of Agricultural Science from La Trobe University in Melbourne, Australia. In 2005, he received his PhD degree in Animal Nutrition and Physiology, also from La Trobe University. Upon completion of his PhD, he conducted postdoctoral research in the United States here at both Purdue and Iowa State universities. In 2008, he joined the Animal Science Department at Iowa State University as an assistant professor in fundamental swine nutrition and metabolism. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Nick to the stage to give us our first presentation. Dr. Nick, the floor is all yours.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Clayton, for the introduction. And thank you to Zinpro and Swine for the invitation just to really talk about an area of research that I'm pretty passionate about, and that is understanding the interactions of nutrition and health, and particularly in nursery pig transition. So for about the next half hour, what I'm going to talk about is some of the insights that I think where there's opportunity for nutrition and health to intersect in that weaning transition period in pigs. So here we go. So really, the suckling period and weaning transition is going to define growth and disease resilience in the nursery and also into the growth finish period. And this is going to look quite different depending on which region of the world that you're in and also what age you're going to wean your pigs. In the US, we typically wean pigs in that 19 to 24 days of age. Europe's going to be a lot older, and also parts of Asia and Australasia are going to be slightly different again. And the key thing to remember is that the weaning age can have a big impact on how the pig's immune system is set up and also its gastrointestinal maturation. So a 28-day post-wean or 28-day-old pig is going to look a lot different than a 19 to 21-day-old pig with regard to some of its immune system and digestive capacities. And this then is going to have an impact both on the lysine curve and how that pig can actually capitalize on energy and nutrient intake. And the other thing we've got to remember, and we sometimes forget this, that the health of the sow herd is often going to define, or most likely defines, the early nursery period health and robustness of those pigs that flow from that sow farm. And unfortunately, a lot of nurseries have health issues due to the fact that there's problems at the sow farm that just carry on, and this can increase at the sow farm. This increases the pressure on post-weaning, on post-farrowing and post-weaning livability and performance. And so at the end of the day, one of the take-home messages, we need to pretty much address what's at the sow farm if we want to have an impact on early nursery pig health. So the suckling period and weaning transition, as I said, is going to define growth, and it's a combination of lots of different things. Part of it's going to be nutrient uptake, digestive capacity and absorption. There's been a lot of work with intestinal barrier permeability and mucus integrity, the mucosal immune system, efficient metabolism, and also in recent years, there's been a lot of work on a stable microbiome. The problem with the stable microbiome, it looks very diverse, and there's a lot of redundancies in the microbiome of animals, or particularly pigs. So therefore, defining really what a good microbiome is really needs a lot more work. And then how does that translate to livability and also pig performance? But if we can get this right at the nursery level and also at the sow farm level, it's going to lead to an optimal lean tissue accretion for those producers and for those pigs. But really, when we talk about nursery and nutrition, we also need to talk about what are the goals in the nursery. And then these goals are going to look very different depending on the production system. Some production systems are going to put a heavy weight or more of an emphasis on increasing livability of the pig. Others may want to reduce antimicrobial use. There's been a lot of work in the era now of zinc oxide reductions. Can we reduce scouring? And we've got to remember, not all scouring is actually going to be related to a pathogen, or not all scouring is actually going to impact pig performance. And then other goals or emphasis may be on optimizing feed consumption and transition, or could be actually just optimizing growth rates. So either one or all of these goals are very acceptable for a producer. And so really, when we go to tailor nutritional strategies or just management strategies, we need to consider what our goals are and what are we trying to achieve within the nursery. So here's a classical figure really just defining what happens at weaning and early. This is by Adam Mosier and others put this together. But then you got to remember some of the early work with regard to intestinal barrier function and integrity was done out of INRA in the early 2000s with Lalise and Pai, where really they showed that weaning stress itself, that the act of actually weaning pigs actually can compromise intestinal epithelial barrier. And then Adam Mosier did a lot of work with Anthony Blitzlager back in the mid-2000s with regard to weaning age and the impact of weaning age actually on barrier dysfunction. And then really what it comes down to is the earlier that we wean pigs, we have more of a compromised intestinal barrier. Due to natural weaning, there's a maturation process that goes on, and we can have a better integrity and better function that goes on. But when we wean early, we have compromised barrier function and development. That's due to increased intestinal permeability, immune system suppression. We also have a hyperactive enteric nervous system. And there's a whole lot of physiology that goes on that just shows that these pigs are just different. And even just a matter of 1 week, going from 19, 21-day-old weaned pig to a 28-day-old weaned pig can have downstream consequences on gastrointestinal function and integrity. But then if we look at actual weaning stress and weaning transition, the separation from the dam and littermates, we have diet transitions going from a milk-based diet to then predominantly a plant-based solid diet. We have environmental changes with temperature fluctuations. Also, we have room and facility changes. We have transport stress. Some places in the US, pigs might get transported for 2 hours. Some might get transported for 24 hours, depending on which region of the country their farrowings occurred, and then where they're going to be raising those pigs. And so there's a big difference in the variability with regard to the duration of transport and also the degree of which transport stress can have an impact on that nursery pig. And then also pathogen exposure is going to be a big one as well. All these are going to actually implement or impact pig development and transition. And what it really leads to, different degrees of these or combinations and severity of these stresses or these events actually lead to villus atrophy, impaired barrier function, impaired intestinal absorption and secretions, absorption of nutrients and secretions. That leads to a kind of a stress-induced hyperphagia or weaning anorexia has been commonly referred to in the past, poor weight gains, and more importantly, can lead to an increased risk of disease and also therefore leading to reduced livability. And in recent years, this has all been antagonized due to the fact that the industry around the world the swine industry around the world has actually lost technologies or is losing technologies due to regulatory pressures, due to AMR concerns, improved antimicrobial stewardship. The veterinary feed directive here in 2017 in the US, we lost the ability to feed growth-promoting subtherapeutic antibiotics. In Europe, this year, just last month, they brought in the zero zinc. So in other words, you can't feed pharmacological levels of zinc. And these technologies are actually going to put more pressure on that weaning transition and how well we can set those pigs up for success. So if we talk about the sow farm itself, many nursery flows are under constant disease threat or a constant health threat. And this is due to the fact that we're here in the Midwest, we deal with multifactorial pathogen and health challenges. It gets frustrating when you talk to people and people review proposals, research proposals and so forth, and they don't think that pigs can undergo a multifactorial pathogen challenge. The reality is that a lot of times our pigs have respiratory viral challenges as well as enteric bacterial challenges or even respiratory bacterial challenges at the same time. And it's layered, it's multifactorial. And we also got to remember that many swine diseases or pathogens, they're endemic in certain regions of the world. And so there's constant exposure and they're just waiting for the opportunity to present itself to actually become and show clinical disease. The other thing that I like to tell people, and we've seen this firsthand multiple times, is not all pathogens are going to result in a change in performance or body weight loss. Not all diseases are going to be infectious. And then the other thing is we've got to remember is that not all scouring is going to be related to a pathogen. Quite often we see pigs scouring that may have nothing to do with a pathogen. It could be to do with diet or some other stress-related event. And so, but we're quick to use antibiotics to treat scouring where it may not need an antibiotic. At the end of the day, disease is going to be a factor of severity of the stress or the pathogen and the duration by which the pig is exposed to. And so the problem that we have, at least that what we've been working with for the last couple of years, is that we have nursery flows that upon arrival, at post-weaning at arrival in our facilities, they're always positive for rotavirus A, B, and C. They could be PRRS stable, or they've had some sort of PRRS exposure. There may or may not be PD exposure. There's always respiratory pressures of influenza and parainfluenza. There's secondary sources that cause problems within the nursery. And then in recent years, there's been a big uptick in the cases of F18 positive hemolytic E. coli that's causing problems within our nursery production. And one thing that we've also seen in the last 12 months is coccidia. We see an increased prevalence of coccidia. So if we just focus on enterotoxigenic E. coli, there's KA8 and F18 fibria or pilus that connect this E. coli or these E. coli to the actual intestinal epithelium or the enterocytes. And these E. coli, these ETEC E. coli can actually eat through the mucosal layer, the protective mucus layer, and actually then adhere through these pillars to the epithelium. And then once they adhere to the epithelium, they can deliver toxins that then lead to toxins to the epithelium, particularly to the enterocytes, that lead to the release of electrolytes and then reverse osmosis. We get increased watery diarrhea, and then it can lead to a lot of other problems that can eventually lead to increased mortalities. And so depending on the toxin profile and depending on the severity and the duration, we can end up with kind of this hemorrhagic bowel that we can see here in this pig down below. Additionally, I think at least in the Midwest, we need to put more emphasis on looking at the reemergence, or at least the problem that coccidia is causing within our sow farms. And so we're seeing increased piglet risk for infection to secondary pathogens if they have coccidia, increased morbidity, mortality, uneven weaning weights. We see suckling pigs that are most affected. But however, we've detected actually coccidia in our post-weaned pig up to about 2 weeks post-weaning in the intestinal epithelium. And also we can look at egg counts actually within their feces. And so this increased scouring and susceptibility of pigs is actually probably causing some of the downstream enteric disruptions that we see in the nursery. And there's just increased pressure on coccidia due to the fact that we are losing or have lost some of the drugs that we can compound and actually feed to sows in North America, or at least in the US. And so if we look at health of sow herds, we see that a lot of our nursery pigs are coming in with rotavirus positive, ETEC, K88 positive, and coccidia coming from the sow farm. There's F18 E. coli actually within these pigs that doesn't typically really truly express its phenotype or disease phenotype till about 7 to 21 days post-weaning, where we start seeing some manifestation of clinical disease. But a lot of it's already in the pig and it's coming from the sow farm. What's really been surprising to us, particularly with the coccidia, we're even seeing this over the winter months. Normally we'd associate at least the ETEC and coccidia more to be associated with the summer months, but we're seeing this even through the winter time. And it's due to the fact that the sow farms haven't been able to handle or deal with these enteric issues within the suckling pig. And then this leads to decreased pig livability, increased usage of antibiotics, and reduced pig performance, and also increased body weight variability. And this can be highlighted by this kind of chart here. So I just gone back over the last 12 to probably 18 months to 2 years and looking at our typical nursery entry weight. So we've been receiving pigs at a weaning body weight of about 5.5 to 6 kilograms. These pigs have been PRRS stable, been vaccinated for PRRS. They're coming in either with moderate to heavy hemolytic E. coli culture growths at arrival, and that just gets exacerbated by 7 to 21 days post-weaning. They're coming in with pretty low CT values for for rotavirus A, B, and C, and there's also sporadic salmonella cultures as well. And then the other thing that we're seeing is about 10 to 30% of the pigs, we can see evidence of coccidia within these pigs. If we don't use medication, we end up with, at a day 42 post-weaning body weight, typically has been in the range of 17 to 22 kilograms. If we use just therapeutic minerals alone and no antibiotics, we can get those end body weights up between 22 to 25 kilograms, and we improve livability of those pigs. If we just use in-feed antibiotics such as Mecadox or Carbadox, we can improve our growth rates to 24 to 25 kilogram body weights by day 42, improve livability. And then we see an added effect if we use therapeutic minerals and antibiotics, in-feed antibiotics on these pigs. If we just use a coccidia stat alone, we get improved livability, but we're not necessarily going to be driving a lot of actual growth rates. So the point is that different degrees of these particular pathogens here, we end up with different growth rate phenotypes and different impacts on livability in the pigs. And this is what we're facing within the industry. How do we manage and feed these pigs? And so how can we define, so what may define, I should say, nursery pig performance? Part of it could be due to the parity of the dam. Are they first parity offspring, second parity offspring? The health status of the sow farm, I think, is a key factor here. Do we implement creep feeding in the lactation period to these pigs pre-weaning? How's the transition diet? Are we improving the palatability, digestibility, driving nutrient and energy intake by changing the densities of the diet? The severity of the transport stress. Are we transporting them during the winter months where there can be cold stress, or even during the summer months where we can get heat stress? We do see transport stress, or at least climate-related stresses in the transport of pigs, depending on what time of year that these pigs are transported. The nursery environment, are we setting it up where they can adequately transition easily into that environment? Is the temperature right? Is the ventilation correct? Is there access to water and feed available for them? Hydration status. A lot of the times we might want to use electrolytes or some other solutions in the water lines in the first 24 to 48 hours to actually drive water intake and also feed intake. As I said before, there's changes in intestinal integrity and function and maturation that could be defining some of these performances. Feed intake and digestive capacity, which we'll hit on in a minute, is a big factor, and also the inflammation that's associated with this. So what we've done, one of the studies that we've done, I'm going to present in the next few slides, is what explains differences in average daily gain differences in nursery pigs if they come in with similar weaning weight or similar body weights at weaning. And so what we did with this study is that we looked at day 2, 7, and 21 and 35. And then we had about 36 pigs in each group. And then you looked at the top 25% and the bottom 25% based on average daily gains at each of these time periods. And we want to know, what is the physiology defining these pigs? Why are high average daily gain pigs growing better compared to low average daily gain pigs? And really this slide here, this table here just shows, even within the first 2 days, some pigs lose body weight at day 2 and day 7. Others are gaining slightly at day 2. By day 7, they're gaining up to 200 grams a day. A lot of it seems to be feed intake related. We've got a 3-fold increase in feed intake within 2 days. So pigs that get on feed seem to grow better. And we see that carry through all the way through to 21 days. And so it could be anywhere from 110 to 150% increase in average daily gain. It seems to be explained by increased capacity for early feed intake. And if we look at over 35 days, we can see we get about a 50 to 60% increase in average daily gain differences by just between those two cohorts of high average daily gain and low average daily gain pigs. And a lot of it is that we see that reflected in feed intake and also a decrease in feed efficiency in the low average daily gain pigs. But what's been puzzling to us is that how can we get these pigs to eat? Because normally by about day 4 to day 7, we see a divergence in feed intake, early feed intake. Our low average daily gain pigs, it's taking them about 7 days just to get up to about 200 grams of feed intake a day, where the other pigs were already up over 200 grams by about day 4 or day 5. So how can we get these pigs to maintain feed intake? The other thing that we're been really interested in looking at is actually looking at intestinal integrity changes. So one of the things that we've always known from John Plusky's work and others is that post-weaning increased intestinal morphology, in other words, villus height and crypt depths, are going to be important for digestive capacity. And also from the work by Inra and Adam Mosier and others showing that post-weaning or that weaning stress induces changes in intestinal integrity. So what we wanted to know was, is there differences in intestinal morphology or intestinal permeability or leakiness in pigs that are high or low average daily gains at day 2, 7, or 21? And pretty much the take-home message that we see here from this data, there's a lot of data here, is that the high average daily gain pigs just have an increased intestinal morphology. In other words, they have longer villi, it's an increased surface area. What we also see, they have an increase in proliferation of stem cells. So there's something going on with stem cell proliferation and maturation that could be explaining why we see improved growth performance in these early nursery pigs. One thing that was surprising to us is that we did not see any indicator of changes in intestinal integrity or permeability between the high or low growth rate pigs. If we looked at ex vivo, this is transepithelial resistance here, and also macromolecule permeability markers. We don't see any major differences between these pigs. And this really hasn't been reported much before, because most of the time it's just to do with weaning age differences, not necessarily post-weaning growth performance. So one of the things that we're looking into, and we really believe that's driving a lot of the differences in early nursery pig performance, is increased digestive capacity, but also increased maturation of the intestinal epithelium, particularly with the full differentiation of absorptive cells. And that's due to want and notch singling. And I won't get into details about that today, but really there's a delayed response in maturation due to low growth rate pigs. And that may be due to the fact of, part of it's confounded by the fact there's low feed intake. If we look at the colon in these pigs, we see a similar story, that we don't see any changes in intestinal integrity within the colon due to our average daily gain, high average daily gain and low average daily gain groups. We see no difference there at all. But what we do see is different between these pigs is we see goblet cell mucin composition is different between average daily gain groups. So we have higher sulfur and silo and total acidic mucin composition within our low average daily gain pigs. So there's something going on there with the secretory barrier that warrants further investigation to suggest that mucus composition may be important with regard to driving actual integrity changes within the pig. The other thing that we've looked at is that what's the relationship between intestinal morphology, and this is just ileum villus height correlations with average daily gain on feed intake. And then what I want to highlight here is this is similar to what John Plusky and others have reported, that there's a nice positive correlation. Increased average daily gain, you have increased villus height, increased feed intake, you have also a good correlation going on there at day 7 post-weaning. The other area that's garnished a lot of attention over the last probably 12 to 18 months with all the ETEC issues in the Midwest is actually the use of crude protein levels in the diet. And also this work has been, a lot of this work has been done in Europe, where low crude protein diets, so crude protein concentrations of, in that 17 to 19% range, have been commonly fed to nursery pigs immediately post-weaning to reduce scouring. And a lot of the times these studies are actually confounded by the lysine curve. Quite often people actually will achieve a 17 to 18% crude protein diet by just reducing the SID lysine concentrations of their diets. Instead of starting nursery pigs off on maybe a 1.4, 1.45 SID lysine, they might go down to a 1.2 or a 1.15 SID lysine curve. But we know for a fact that it does reduce scouring in these pigs. The other thing that's also been shown for many years now is that dietary therapeutic zinc and copper, so pharmacological levels of zinc and copper, are often used to aid nursery pig health and performance. And part of this could be due to the fact that it's reducing scouring, it could be reducing enteric burdens, improving intestinal health, and then other things that it is helping driving early feed intake. So what we've done, we've done quite a few studies, but I'll just share one of them here, that we did a 14-day post-weaning study where we looked at two crude protein levels in our nursery pigs, and then we fed them with or without therapeutic minerals. So we had a 17.5% low crude protein diet, a 24% high crude protein diet, and then we fed pharmacological zinc and copper or no pharmacological zinc or copper in a 2x2 design. If we look at the 14-day growth performance on these pigs, we can see here that our average daily gains were significantly increased with the combination of zinc and copper, but not by crude protein levels. So crude protein concentrations in these nursery diets did not change actually average daily gain or average daily feed intake. But we didn't see any interaction between crude protein or zinc and copper usage in this nursery study. What we did see, though, was a significant increase in due to zinc and copper in average daily gains and also feed intake. So we get about a 50 or 33% increase in average daily gains due to the use of pharmacological minerals in the first 14 days. We see about a close to a 200% or a doubling of growth rates in these pigs. And like what we've showed you previously, a lot of this appears to be driven by feed intake changes. With the use of zinc and copper in the dashed lines here, irrespective of the high or low crude protein diet, we can see that we're driving early feed intake in these pigs. Thus, this data again is just really showing that driving early feed intake seems to be the factor to actually improve nursery pig performance. And we didn't see any differences with crude protein effects on feed intake in this study. The other thing that we looked at was fecal scores, because feeding high crude protein diets, we generally we see the increase in fecal looseness of the pigs. But what we saw in this study, we didn't see any effect of crude protein on fecal scores. What we did see is that the use of zinc and copper in these high or low crude protein diets actually decreased fecal scores, with 3 being liquidy to watery diarrhea to liquid, with 0 being solid and 1 being normal. So overall, these pigs were relatively loose all the way through the first 14 days post-weaning. What we also looked at is we want to know, does crude protein level or actually pharmacological zinc or copper actually change the CT abundance of some enteric pathogen markers? So we looked at rotavirus A, B, and C CT counts, as well as F18 and some toxin genes associated with the F18 ETEC. And we want to know, because we know these pigs were all positive for these two pathogens, and F18 toxigenic E. coli and also rotavirus. And so we want to know at day 14 post-weaning, is there differences due to diet with regard to the CT counts? And the take-home message here is that zinc and copper tended to, or lowers the actual burden of the virus A, but really didn't move the needle much with regard to CT values within the epithelium within the lumen of the ileum or the colon of these pigs. So this would suggest that at this time point, we're not really changing the genomic composition or the genomic content of these pathogens within the epithelium, even though the pigs were positive for them. So the other thing that we're interested in looking at is that we're seeing a lot more colitis in our nursery pigs, and also atrophy of the intestine, whether it's villus or even the crypts in the large intestine, but villus in the small intestine. So we actually sequenced these pigs. We actually scored these pigs for through histopathology blindly for colitis and also atrophy. And what I want to highlight here is these are both a colonic epithelial cross section. These are normal. You see these nice deep crypts here, and then on the right hand side you see colitis where all the crypts are all matted together. There's no real kind of colonic structure left in these pigs. We're seeing the bottom 10 to 30% of our pigs actually coming in with some degree of colitis. And our hypothesis is really this colitis is induced by the fact that there's enteric pressure, disease pressure in the suckling period with rotavirus, coccidia, and even some K88 E. coli presence in the suckling period that's allowing more milk and nutrients to go to the hind gut to then exacerbate inflammation. We also see that we have an increase in weaning stress associated with these pigs, and then therefore more nutrients are coming into the hind gut post-weaning, and then this exacerbating that. So looking at the incidence of this colitis score, with 0 being normal or normal intestinal epithelium, 3 being higher rate, the take-home message is that the use of zinc and copper, we see 50 to 60% of the pigs that were scored actually have normal colonic or colitis scores. In other words, they're all healthy. And then we see a high incidence rate in pigs that were not fed zinc or copper, or therapeutic levels of zinc or copper. And that high crude protein diets actually increase the incidence rate of colitis, which has kind of been generally reported in Europe. So you have more crude protein being fermented, it can cause enteric disturbances, and we're seeing that. We also see a similar thing where zinc and copper can actually attenuate or prevent a lot of villus atrophy in these pigs, but we don't see much of a difference with regard to the use of high or low crude protein diets. So in summary, I know we've gone through a lot of stuff here very quickly, but gut health is multifaceted. Early feed intake is critical. Enteric health challenges are consistently with our nursery flows that we've been working with for the last 2 years, where they have some degree of Hemolytic E. coli, Salmonella, always positive for rotavirus, varying degrees of coccidia. And then we're seeing varying degrees of diarrhea, but not all the diarrhea is actually, or looseness, stool looseness is associated with a pathogen and may not or should not be treated with antibiotics. We also see that pharmacological zinc and copper improve peak performance, and this is working through multiple mechanisms, which I can get into in another time. But really, it is a useful tool for producers here in North America. There is issues with using it in Europe, but then we have a marginal impact on performance with high or low crude protein diets. But the main thing we see with feeding high crude protein diets to early nursery pigs is that we see an increase in intestinal colitis incidence if it's not fed with therapeutic minerals or antibiotics. And so overall, higher average daily gain in the early nursery period seems to be related to feed intake capacity or absorptive capacity, villus structure, as well as increased maturation of the intestines. And there's various mechanisms for that. And so diet can be used, and it could be used in multiple ways. We didn't get into any of this stuff here in this current talk, but really diet could be used to bind or neutralize pathogens and toxins. The use of fibers has been shown to bind E. coli, etc. Reduce intestinal inflammation. We can enhance intestinal maturation and feed intake through diet structure and diet composition. We can also use diet to reduce scouring, and that may be pathogenic or non-pathogenic scouring can be affected by diet structure and diet composition. And then also we can use diet to reduce antibiotic use. And this could be through the use of functional fibers, functional amino acids, mineral nutrition, phytogenics, and also I think more attention needs to be played on coccidiostats and how we can use coccidiostats in sows and also in the suckling period. So with that, I'd like to thank Eric Burrow and Emma Helm. Eric was at the vet school, helped us with a lot of the work here on the diagnostic side. Carson DeMille conducted most of the research presented herein. I also like to thank Kayla Miller and Mitch Nisley. Funding for most of this work has come from the USDA, so I'd like to thank them, and also Iowa pork producers. And with that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Nick. Outstanding presentation. As a reminder to our audience, I know you've got questions. Please put those questions into the chat right now. We're going to come back to you, Nick, after our next presentation, and we'll do the Q&A jointly with Dr. Ton. So for our next presenter,
thank you.
For our next presenter, please help me to welcome Dr. Ton Kramer to the stage. Dr. Kramer earned his Doctor of Veterinary Medicine and a master's degree in animal science from the Federal University of Paraná, Brazil. He continued his studies and obtained a degree as a specialist in animal production from Federal University of Lavras, Brazil, and 2 masters of business administration from the Getúlio Vargas Foundation. He's currently a PhD candidate of animal science at Federal University of Paraná. In addition to his academic achievements, he served as a former vice president former president of the Brazilian Association of Veterinary Specialists in Swine, the Parana State Branch, and is the current vice president and active member of the national board. Dr. Kramer is a veterinarian and business manager at Zinpro Animal Nutrition in South America. He leverages his education and extensive hands-on experience in nutrition and animal health to support his team and service customers. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Tan to give us his presentation. Dr. Tan, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. It's a nice pleasure to be here with you and with the audience, so thank you for the opportunity. So Dr. Gabler did a very nice presentation about what is the challenge on the nursery phase. And what we are going to do right now is to understand the impact of the right zinc on these challenges, focusing on health and performance. So I'm not going to repeat everything that was already presented by Dr. Gabler, but we know that the weaning results in a lot of challenges for the piglets. And the way that we manage this challenge will impact in the rest of the life of these piglets. So considering that and thinking how to reach good performance of the animals, we need to think how is possible that in the same production system, we got different performance on animals. For example, in this case, we have a Brazilian production system in the nursery, where we found in the control that the piglets at the end of the phase got 64 pounds versus in the same system, another batch of animals got almost 66 pounds of body weight. And more than that, we also found that there are differences between these batches of animals, considering the quality of the animals, thinking that a group of animals had a higher percentage of substandard pigs in comparison with the others that represented in these batches a difference of 70 full value pigs. So I would like to spend some time thinking on that. And I invite you to think about what we want when working on swine production, and in this case, in the nursery phase. And I would like to propose you 4 pillars of the swine production. So I invite you to think how we can produce robust pigs that will result in productive pigs. And doing that, we will allow those animals to finish the phase in a stronger way. And so with that, we will responsibly raising these porks. So thinking on that, we need to understand those post-weaning challenges and think about the opportunities we have with these animals. And as we already saw, there are a lot of challenges and changings that these animals are suffering that are involved with the microbiota and the infections that these animals are challenged. We are mixing animals and transporting this for sometimes long distances. These animals are suffering with environmental changes and challenges. And also, these animals are also suffering with changes in the feed. So what happens with these animals during this period, is that we are promoting changes in how these animals are living from a very comfortable phase here in the lactation period to the post-weaning. So these changes will reflect in the performance of the animals. So this will impact on gut integrity, but also will impact in inflammation and microbiota quality. And this will impact in the life of these animals too. So, and also we need to consider that not only the gut is that we need to think about, and Dr. Gabler talked about the multifactorial points that we need to take care. And we know that in North America, PRRS is a very challenging disease. And we see here in this survey that in the last years we are seeing more and more cases. So everything that we are seeing here will impact in the physiology of the animals and what they are performing. So when the animals are challenged, his status will change, and the outputs from the organs, and in this case from the liver, will also change. And these changes also impact, for example, in the liver side, that will increase in 6% because of they are overcharged to try to compensate all these changes and challenges that the piglet is suffering. And also the demand of nutrients is also changing. And the results of that is that we are not going to see protein accumulation, but we are also see that the demand of the reserves will be increased to support these challenges. So what we need to do is to avoid that these challenges complicate the life of this piglet. And thinking on that, I recall this review, this nice paper talking about a tool that we use to use in short time ago, that we used to use antimicrobials in lower doses to improve the quality of the gut. But I confess you that in the beginning I thought that this was to control bacteria, but actually we know that these antibiotics has an anti-inflammatory activity. But since we are having some cares about the use of antibiotics, this tool is not allowed anymore. So we need to think how to compensate this. And this pass for the 3 points of an important tripod that we are always think about. That means genetic and selection, management and environment, and finally the nutrition. When we have this in a very good shape, we will allow to the animals a good health and also a good welfare. And this is what we need to look for. So thinking on that and thinking about the inflammation and the immune response and how this impact on performance, let's take a look on the opportunities we have here. So what we need to do is to understand that it is necessary to enable animals to have or to show his maximal potential, and despite the challenges we present to them. And so it's necessary to limit the risk factors, or at least allow these animals to respond better despite of these risk factors. And thinking on that, this is a very nice review from 2017, where the researchers understand that zinc has an important role as an antioxidant and as an anti-inflammatory. So what they proposed to us is that zinc has a huge influence in the immune system, doing some regulation not only in the intensity of this the inflammation or the immune response, but also in the duration. And this will impact in how the body will answer to these challenges. And also looking for the literature that is available, we can find a bunch of zinc papers related with epithelial integrity, inflammation, and health. And especially in the last 10 years, you will find a lot of information. And from those, I would like to spend some time with this one. This is very fresh and related with something that we were suffering, that is COVID. And even this is related with COVID, we can extrapolate this information for PRRS or for influenza or any other infectious, especially viral diseases. And what the group of Dr. Lothar Ring proposed here is that zinc has an impact on the respiratory tract, doing some actions or having some actions, especially in the barrier function in the epithelial, improving the quality of the cells, the integrity of them, but also the tissue integrity, and also having an important impact on the cilia morphology. Also, they showed that zinc has a direct antiviral effect, even acting on the virus, but also acting in this immune system against this virus. As I also presented, zinc has also an anti-inflammatory effect because it regulates the nuclear factor kappa beta that determine the production and the distribution of cytokines. And also zinc has action on bacterial growth. And finally, zinc is also related with other risk factors that may impact on the disease. Thinking about the epithelial integrity, we know that zinc has a huge effect, and we need to think not only on the intestinal integrity, not only on the respiratory tract epithelial integrity, but we need to think out of the body, out of the systems and the epithelial that compose these tissues. So thinking on that, I would like to try to convince you that zinc has a huge effect on epithelial integrity, and I invite you to see this review from Dr. Mayorga Lozano from Iowa State University. She did a very nice review from 34 papers showing that in different species, we will see that zinc has a huge impact on intestinal integrity. And this is because this zinc acts directly in the cells, especially in the tight junctions, because the zonal occludens and the proteins, occludin and claudin, that determine the how strong is these tight junctions, they are dependent on zinc to be as strong as we need. And this is very important because having this intestinal integrity will be necessary to avoid that the bad bugs go inside to the body, like, for example, salmonella or E. coli or any other bacteria or any other agent that we don't want to go inside to the body. So what this research showed that the supplementation of zinc improve epithelial integrity, especially in this case during salmonella infection. We saw that zinc has an important impact on the epithelial integrity, but also we need to consider that zinc is necessary to all the wound healing. The availability of zinc in the body will determine how fast is that recovering. So let's see how this is applied in the swine production. So I will show you some researches that were done, and I start this that shows the heat stress impact on the piglets and the pigs. To have an idea, here where I am, I'm with 83 degrees Fahrenheit, 28 degrees Celsius. So this is not as good as we want. Some animals, if we go to a farm, will be suffering with heat stress, and this will impact on gut integrity and also will allow to infect these animals with other bugs. So using Zinpro zinc in this case, it was shown that we could improve high low integrity in this heat stress condition. Also, it happens when we challenge the animals with bacteria, in this case showing Lawsonia. And this research also showed that not only Zinpro Zinc improved the epithelial integrity, but also as consequence of this, we saw lower prevalence of the disease, and the lesions had lower severity too. And I would like to show you this in the next slides. So what we see here is that after inoculation of Lawsonia, and after the introduction of Zinpro Zinc, we see that after 21 days of that, we have in the animals receiving Zinpro Zinc, we see half of the animals with macroscopic lesions in the gut. And also on 28 days, we see the same trend. So we see here that we have less animals with lesions due to Lawsonia. And when we did the classification of these lesions, we also saw that the animals in blue, that are those that received Zinpro Zinc, they had lower score of lesions comparing with the control, and this persists during the period of the challenge. And this is because we saw a seroconversion, a faster seroconversion of the animals that received Zinpro Zinc, but we also saw an improving in cellular action of the immune system that results in lower prevalence of injuries and severity. This also brings us to talk about immunocompetence. And in the same research, what we see was that the animals in blue that received Zinpro Zinc, they had faster seroconversion, showing higher serum antibodies in 14 days and further. Considering that, thinking about the vaccination response, this other trial also shows something interesting, that when we compared 3 different treatments of the animals, the treatment group showed a mortality of 8%, versus when the animals received vaccination against Lawsonia intracellularis, the mortality dropped to 5.5. And finally, when the animals received the vaccination plus Zinpro Zinc, the mortality decreased a lot. So we see that the integrity on epithelia, also the immune response, and also a better vaccination response will impact on mortality and also in performance. We can also see this in an influenza challenge, comparing different sources of zinc. This is the basic zinc chloride against Zinpro Zinc. And what we see, considering removals that mean mortality and euthanized pigs, we see that during all the post-weaning period, during this challenge, we see that animals that received Zinpro Zinc had a lower removal rate. So it's clear that zinc rocks. This will have an impact on performance. So let's see this. Defining the dose of the better zinc, use it on water, we see that in a challenge with LPS, E. coli LPS, what we see is that using 40 ppm of Zinpro Zinc on water will be enough to reduce, in this case, the TNF alpha. But considering the serum zinc, we could see that the highest serum zinc that is important to have the better response, we reach 160 ppm on water. But thinking on performance, we can see that the average daily gain is better when we support animals with 74 milligrams of zinc per liter of water. And the feed efficiency is also improve it when we reach 70 ppms of zinc on water. So with this, we can understand that the immune response is dose dependent from zinc. We can improve the inflammatory response using Zinpro Zinc, and also the recommendations by water is to use between 40 and 80 milligrams of zinc per liter of water. So you can ask me, Ton, can I get this result with any source of zinc? And the answer is not. And this happens because when we supply animals with zinc, there are a lot of mass in the gastrointestinal tract lumen, and this is because some molecules has different characteristics and will respond different, and will also interact in the lumen of the gut with other ingredients that are presented that. Further than this, zinc, for example, will compete for some of the same transporters that will allow the mineral to go inside of the body. For example, DMT is one of the transporters from the apical surface of the enterocyte, and he will compete space with zinc, iron, manganese, and copper. And this competition sometimes will not allow any of these minerals to go inside, and they will not be available in the bloodstream to have this function, physiological function. This is a very fresh paper showing that exactly this that I was talking about. They did an evaluation about fiber, in this case, a potato fiber, and compared different sources of zinc. And the conclusion from the researchers was that the intake of fiber enhanced the zinc absorption and copper absorption, but decreased the absorption from iron and manganese. And also, they showed that zinc glycinate is less soluble than in the gut than zinc sulfate, decreasing, in this case, the absorption. So we need to conclude that there are sources and sources. There are a lot of sources of minerals, but they are not the same. So we need to be confident thinking on that. So, and also when thinking about organic trace minerals, there are a lot of differences between them. And I would like to invite you to review this publication from Goff that did a very nice understanding of the mechanisms of absorptions of the different sources. And I will try to summarize this in a very quick way. We already saw that in general, the regular way that the minerals are absorbed are using the metal ion transported, like the ZIP for zinc or DMT for all the divalent minerals. And the inorganics use this route, and some organics that has the behavior of inorganic will have the same route. The difference is that sometimes they will be in the bloodstream and sometimes they are not. And what is the difference between the performance minerals is that they use another way of absorption, that is the amino acid transporter. And this will allow these minerals to go to the bloodstream and be metabolically available to result in their functions in the body. And this will also allow the repeatability of the response. That is very important when we think on any technology that we are using. So if you want to know a little bit more about what I'm saying here, you can review these publications that shows that the amino acid complex are transported by amino acid transporters, facilitating this absorption. And also these other very good paper showing that in this case, the zinc amino acid complex or the Zinpro Zinc uses the amino acid transporter to be absorbed. This is really an advantage on the supplementation of these products. So we saw that source matters, and this has consequences on production and performance. We already saw this data. So using Zinpro Zinc, we will have better piglets, performing better, with homogeneity in the size. And this is possible because we improve not only his capacity to grow, but also this is due a better health. And this is a very nice evaluation we did here in Brazil, where we supplied animals in the nursery phase with Zinpro Zinc, and we follow these animals to the slaughterhouse. And doing the lung assessment in the slaughterhouse, what we saw was that lungs with lesions, we saw a decreasing of 63% of prevalence of animals or lungs with lesions. We also see an improvement on 70% of the animals of the lungs with healing characteristics, showing that not only we improved the health of the animals, but also the capacity of these animals to recover from a challenge. And considering the Brazilian herd pneumonia index, we also see something interesting, that the group that used it, that were in control, had an index of 1.16 versus 0.31 from the Zinpro Zinc animals. To understand that, the under 0.55, this means no pneumonia in the herds. From 0.55 to 0.89, this is there are presence of pneumonia by Mycoplasma pneumonia, but this is not a big issue. And finally, above 0.9, this means severe pneumonia. One remark, I remember you that these animals just received Zinpro Zinc in the nursery. These animals also received all the vaccination protocol from the system, and we saw that this reflects on the slaughterhouse. We also see that the medical treatments necessary for the animals, this is another evaluation, is lower when the animals receive Zinpro Zinc. So we talked till now about nursery, but we cannot forget the origins, and this was also said by Dr. Gabler, and we need to think that sows matter. So the quality of the piglet is also determined by the sow. So improve the quality of the sow will determine the quality of the piglet, the quality of the colostrum, the management we do with the sow, and the piglets will determine his performance in the future life. Especially when we consider that in the last genetics or the new genetics, we will improving the litter size. So we are seeing a high number of piglets born by these sows, but we are also seeing that the weight of these animals are lower, or the amount of the low viability piglets is increasing. So we need to take care on that. And what this research from a group of Brazilian and Italians did was show that the in utero experience of these piglets, and they evaluated the lameness, will impact on their performance, on the progeny performance, determining that sows that has lameness will have worse weight gain and increased aggressiveness. So, concluding that, understand that healthy sows are neat will allows us to have robust piglets. And having robust piglets will determine what we are going to have in the future. Oof. Finally, closing remarks is that we need to think the swine production not in one phase, but we need to have a holistic view, because what we did in each phase will determine what is going to be in the plate of the final customer. Considering that, it's important to think the right source of any technology you are going to use, and in this case, the right zinc. And I would like to finish my presentation remembering you that Zinpro has 316 peer-reviewed papers at this moment. So, and this is an important remark, but because talking with some people in the market, they say, well, it's interesting that Zinpro publish everything they produce, even those researchers that don't bring good results for Zinpro. And this gives us the trust and the confidence for all the recommendations we are doing in the field. And this allows us to be in a category of one in the market we are, and I'm very proud to be part of this. With that, I would like to say thank you for you all for this time. And if you want to reach me, you can point your phones on the QR code. This is my WhatsApp link, or you can reach me in email or on Instagram or phone. And don't do some confusion. I'm the blue, the guy in blue. So thank you all for this opportunity.
Well, thank you, Dr. Tan, and thanks for the clarification on that last slide. I wasn't sure exactly who was who, but we're clear. You're the guy in blue there. Excellent presentation. Thank you for covering so much. I think we had two wonderful presentations here. And I want to remind the audience to, again, submit your questions via the chat function. We're going to go ahead and get right to the Q&A portion, but the team with Swine will push those questions towards us here. So if we can bring up Dr. Nick now, we'll go ahead and get started here with the Q&A. And I do, Dr. Nick, want to go to you first. The stressors and challenges related with the weaning process that you covered are not new to the pig industry, but we've seen this increased E. coli disease post-weaning here over the last year. Can you kind of speculate what has changed, right? I don't think we're moving pigs farther. Maybe it is health that's changed, but can you speculate what's made this kind of an industry phenomenon?
Yeah, it's I think you just gave me a loaded question. So
take it wherever you want.
All right. So I think part of it is that we have lost some of the antimicrobial technologies, and so therefore that's led to an increased downstream issue. The other big thing is that I really think that there's something going on with coccidia in some of the sow farms. The sow farms are having a lot more issues keeping crates clean, and whether it's power washing or just due to labor shortages and other things, and also timing of just the crate availability with pig flow. As therefore, I think that's allowed for some more. This parasite to really stay more longer term within the pig than what we would anticipate. Plus, we've also lost the ability to kind of at least treat against it with certain drugs that aren't compounded anymore. And then there's a lot less technologies available for coccidiostats, or at least ionophore-based coccidiostats in pigs because of the potential toxicity issues with pigs. Mm-hmm. So I think that's partially setting up the 28-day post-wean, 35-day post-wean E. coli that you hear a lot about. I think that's part of it. But the problem is that no one really looks at the colon when they actually look at all the E. coli, all the F18 E. coli issues. They seem to bypass that, generally speaking, from what I've seen. And then I think we may have be missing some of the things. So we're looking at the smoking gun of an increased culture of an F18 E. coli, and we're seeing the edema and the kind of the hemorrhagic bowel stuff. But then what's caused it, I think, is more rotavirus issues and coccidia setting them up to fail. And I think that's part of it. As for why we see the increase exactly, I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's a combination of lots of things. I know that's not a very straightforward answer, but I think that's part of it.
Oh, I think that's an excellent answer, Nick. The reality is, if it was a straightforward answer, we would have solved this already, right? So yeah. It is nuanced, and I think you bring up an excellent point. We've lost really one of our huge control mechanisms for coccidiosis management in the sow farm. We're going on our third summer now without availability of the primary product that we've used historically.
Yeah, and we know we can track it from health records. We know when that technology was used, we didn't have these increased incidences downstream in the nursery. But when it wasn't used, that's when we see, I wouldn't call it a train wreck, but that's when we see the increased incidence rates.
Yeah.
And we see a lot more fallouts, and it's at varying levels.
Yep. And Dr. Ton, we had a question during your presentation from the audience that goes right down this pathway. I believe it was Trevor Lutz who asked, E. coli in a co-infection model. Dr. Gabler talked a little bit about coccidiosis. What are your thoughts on coccidiosis? And then also I'd throw out rotavirus. If we think it's a small intestine issue, well, rotavirus we know is going to be there doing damage to that intestine as well. Do you have thoughts, Dr. Ton, on the co-infection and the contribution other pathogens have to these E. coli challenges?
Yeah, I was thinking a practical standpoint. So what we usually see is that the basic measurements that are needed to control that is that improve the colostrum management and improve the quality of the sow and this colostrum management, but also take care of the biosecurity measurements like cleaning and disinfection, that are basic things that sometimes are not well done due to the rush on the farm. So when we think on the basics, we improve everything in general. So, and also understand the needs of a good vaccination protocol to do that. So I'm not an expert on that, but I like to think on the simple things and the basics to start everything.
But on the rotavirus side, is actually, there hasn't been a lot of nutritional based research to, or at least management strategies outside of vaccine and some disinfection stuff with how to actually manage it. It's endemic in a lot of parts of the world. But then, where everyone's focused on salmonella mitigation strategies, or they focus on a E-Tech type stuff, but no one seems to want to tackle rotavirus. And I think it's an area that we really need to put more focus on, and because it's a common denominator in a lot of these current E-Tech challenges that we're seeing, and it's setting them up. They're coming in with CT values down in the teens, like from around 12 to 15 CTs. They're pretty hot coming in, and they're loose. So I think that's just exacerbating it, but no one wants to research it.
Yeah. And
one important point, Clayton, is that thinking on that is that there are some confusion on sometimes on the diagnostics, because due to the mass on this period, we are also seeing Seneca virus as a wave bug that affects our production. So, and sometimes you don't know what is happening, and Seneca virus is also presented there. So, and again, how to improve that, we need to think in a global perspective.
We almost have a little bit of a case control situation here, because the challenges with coccidiosis may be a bit unique to the United States right now, because it really is a regulatory deal. In much of the world, brand name Baycox, which a lot of people will be familiar with, is available. It has had no issues with supply, as I understand it. So, Dr. Ton, as you think about production in Brazil, have you seen the same phenomenon over the last year with the E. coli kind of explosion post-weaning in Brazil production that we've seen in the United States, or is it unique to the U.S. and maybe it is unique to our loss of coccidia control mechanism here in the U.S.?
E. coli is always a challenge. But I don't believe here in our realities it's a big issue. It doesn't mean that it's not an issue. It's always present. So what is happening in Europe with the zinc oxide banning, this is something that are worrying people here, and this is what we are working hard to improve the quality of the sow and the colostrum management, but also bringing some other solutions to replace this strategy of the zinc oxide. So again, when we improve the health in general, we will allow the animal to perform better, even any other infection that could affect him.
I think that's pretty compelling that, it sounds like E. coli is an issue in Brazil right now, but not maybe elevated over the last 12 months like we've seen here in the US. And association's not causation, right? But shame on me for not thinking about that before. But I think it's an interesting observation, at least. And it feeds into Dr. Gabler's, theory that this coccidiosis challenge may be a part of it.
Well, that's rotavirus as well. I think it's a combination of both.
Yeah.
And it's just setting them up to fail, and it's compounded then by the natural or the weaning stress aspect.
You mentioned, Dr. Ton, that in Europe, they're looking for zinc replacements because regulatory changes there. They've got to find other solutions. I can't imagine pig flows that I work with where we would be without zinc over the last year. I mean, it's been a challenge to optimize the zinc rations, and I want to get to that a little later. But man, without zinc inclusion in our nursery diets, I can't imagine where we would be. Can we talk about the basic science a little bit? And maybe Dr. Nick, I'll ask you to kick this off, but can you kind of help us a little bit with the mechanism with responses seen to zinc and colitis? What drives that response? Do we totally understand it, or do we just know that it helps and don't completely understand the mechanism of action?
Yeah, no one has clear response for that, but we need to figure out some things. And the first thing is that understand that zinc oxide is something completely different than the other sources, because zinc oxide has an action in the lumen of the gut, so it's the absorption is very poor. So his action is to we can think about some of possibilities, but what is at the end of the day, what he is going to do is to avoid the fixing of the bacteria in the cell, so avoiding the damage that they cause. So, but at the same time, avoiding these high levels of zinc oxide in the gut also impact on the other microbiota. So it avoids the proteobacteria, but will allow the grow will determinate the growing of bad bacteria or affecting the microbiota in general. So what we need to do right now is, since we are not allowed, or in this case in Europe, they are not allowed to use the zinc oxide to control E. coli or Salmonella, we need to improve the gut integrity, but also improve the capacity of the immune system to react fast. And this is directly in the animal, but this is also determined by how we raised this piglet from the sow, considering the colostrum management, the environment that we promoted for this animal during his rearing, and also how high is the stress during the weaning period that was very well demonstrated by Nick.
Yeah, so zinc oxide, I think comes down to, like I had one of my slides, what's your goal of using it in your nursery program? Because if we're trying to find an alternative to zinc oxide, and we went through this with subtherapeutic antibiotics, it's an alternative for what? Are we trying to reduce? Are we using it to reduce scouring? Then we can find some alternatives to anti-scouring agents. Are we using it to drive performance? Therefore, okay, we need to have either a feed intake or growth response associated with it. And zinc oxide, for many reasons, has multiple mechanisms that have been shown partially in culture conditions, but also in the animal. And I think there's a couple of questions related to that here. So if you give me a minute, I'll go through some of them. But part of it is it's anti-inflammatory. It can work. It's anti-inflammatory in the sense that it can inhibit NF-kappa B translocation to the nucleus to then initiate a pro-inflammatory cytokine response. There's an A20 protein that can get switched on that can inhibit that translocation of that transcription factor. Therefore, it can work through that mechanism. There's some work out of I think it was Germany or France that showed that. Also, it has been shown in acute circumstances, so in the first 2 to 3 weeks, it has a mode of action where it can actually help with activation of T cells. So there's a activated T cell mechanism. So it has an impact. But then if you go beyond a couple of weeks, then it can have a adverse effect as well. So there's an immune, we'll call it at least a T cell grooming aspect to it that is a potential mechanism. Then it has been shown to potentially reduce microbial proliferation, but I'd say that data has been more on a benchtop rather than in the animals, so it's hard to really say to what extent it's actually doing that. Other modes of action that we've seen that it consistently drives early feed intake in that first 7 to 14 days post-weaning. And the way it's doing that, we know that it's actually increasing the abundance of ghrelin in the stomach lining, and so it's driving it through an appetite mechanism. But what we don't know is the stomach ghrelin actually how is it working then on the hypothalamus to actually drive that appetite? And then also, is it going through the ghrelin axis to then lead to an IGF-1 response because of the growth hormone secretagogue aspect of it that could be driving some of this? And then the work that we've kind of fallen into is a great prelim question for students. Does a pig eat to grow or grow to eat? And so you can't separate the two. But all we know is that if you can increase feed intake capacity, nutrient uptake, you increase livability and you increase growth rates. And then by default, that pig's growing more, therefore is it eating more and vice versa. But at least zinc oxide, when there's an enteric, where there's some degree of enteric kind of challenge at varying levels, we get that early feed intake response. And we see it in individual fed pig, we see it in group pen pigs. But you don't get it once that pig has gone through a full maturation, and then you get like that 28-day post-weaning when the intestinal epithelium is fully maturated and the immune system of the pig is kind of now set up to be kind of self-serving. We don't get that response. There's also other modes of action as well, but they're probably the main couple.
As a follow-up, is that lack of response seen in an older pig the reason why we don't try to manipulate lactation diets to reduce the E. coli shedding from sows to piglets?
I think so. I think it is. Because there's something to do with the maturity of the immune system and also the concentrations of zinc within the animal itself, like the tissue pools. There's some interaction there that's kind of, we'll say, thrown out a little bit during the weaning process. The pigs aren't necessarily zinc deficient, but as soon as we can get them sufficient and we go beyond that, then if we feed more than 3,000 ppm of zinc for more than 3 or 4 weeks, then we start impacting the pancreas. There's some zinc toxicity going on and some other things which can be negative. And so there is a concentration by duration, and it slightly varies depending on the health status and the feed intake of the pig. And so it's complicated.
Yeah, understood. And I've been involved in some complicated discussions. So Dr. Tan, I welcome your thoughts. How do we get to alignment on the optimal zinc inclusion levels in diets, in nursery diets going forward? Do you guys argue about this as much in Brazil as we do in the United States? Because we argue about it all the time.
Yeah, there are some confusions about the mineral levels and zinc is some point. And one of these points is that we consider zinc is all zincs are the same, and we know that it is not. And this is it is clear. It makes clear when you understand the absorption process. So and this has a huge impact. And I would like to add another ingredient on this conversation, that is the high doses of phytase that are being used, not necessarily on nursery phase, but this phytase is allowing to release some minerals from the fiber of the plant that is also complicating even more the situation, because as I show it, there are a competition between the transporters. So what the success from Zinpro with the Zinpro Zinc and the Zinpro minerals is that this complexation with the amino acid allows the mineral to be absorbed by another pathway. So they are not competing by the same transporter from the epithelial border to the bloodstream. So understanding this will allow the animal to receive the correctly amount of the mineral. Considering that we are talking about not only about deficiency, that is not the case, but the relative deficiency. That means we have animals suffering some stress, some inflammation, increasing the demand of these minerals to all the immune responses. But the amount of mineral, in this case the zinc, or we could consider copper and selenium and manganese too, that are important for the antioxidant processes. Since the animal has no capacity to absorb all the demand, the animal will demonstrate a relative deficiency with decreasing on performance. On the other hand, if we can improve the amount of these trace minerals in the bloodstream, or we will allow a better immune response and recovery, as we saw in all the research that I showed in the presentation.
And also, if we're talking about enteric disturbances, and Tom kind of touched on this with wound healing, it's a similar mechanism where it's enhancing wound healing to actually enhancing intestinal maturation and recovery, whether it's through epithelial cell migration or just improving just the way that pig responds. And if it's concentrated in the lumen, when the intestinal epithelium heals, it seems to get a lot of its nutrients from the lumen rather than from the bloodstream or off the back of the pig. And so you see that with some of the earlier rotavirus work, where if they gave branch chain amino acids through the lumen, they can enhance repair of that actual epithelium in I think I was used a piglet model, but it was human application. They enhance it that way rather than the pig actually kind of mobilizing those resources out of its own tissue reserves. So if it's luminal damage or epithelial damage to the lumen, then I think there's something going on with zinc oxide that's beneficial. And then you could probably get a similar response if you actually have higher concentrations of zinc in the diet of other sources for that particular purpose.
Very good. Gentlemen, we could probably have this discussion from now until next year. And I've greatly enjoyed picking your brains. Please know that I've benefited from this discussion a lot. And maybe we'll schedule a Teams call here later just to catch up with us three. But I probably do need to wrap it up here because we're over time, and I'm sure our audience is ready to get on to the next parts of their day. I'll give you some final thoughts from my perspective. I thought Dr. Nick did an excellent job of starting us very appropriately with discussing the weaning transition and the intersection it naturally brings of health and nutrition. Nick, you did a great job by starting with health at the sow farm. A chef is only as good as their ingredients. And the most important ingredient in pig production is a high health wean pig that's weaned at the optimal age. Remember, the first thing we do with a wean pig is stress them. That's the first thing we do with that awesome wean pig. We stress them, and we stress them heavily. We take them away from their mom. There's pathogen stress from exposure to other litters, and that's compounded 1,000 times over if you commingle with other farms. There's transport stress from movement to the nursery or wean to finish site. There's the environmental stress of adjusting to a new thermoregulatory environment in your new barn. And on top of all of that, we're asking pigs how to learn to eat and drink all at the same time. No wonder, these challenges, when they get out of control soon after weaning, we see tremendous losses to lifetime pig performance. We can't afford to make mistakes with our nursery nutrition program in the face of all these inherent challenges to the pig that the weaning process just naturally creates. Dr. Ton, I thought you did a wonderful job of highlighting the need to manage our health risk factors. And one of the ways we do this is through the use of feed ingredients with inherent antibiotic properties, such as zinc and copper, as you very well covered. There's a huge body of work within the literature that describes the impact of zinc on our health status. And I can tell you as a veterinarian, I value that intestinal epithelial integrity you described very highly. Without intestinal integrity, our enteric pathogens take advantage of that leaky gut situation. They go systemic, and that generally results in a dead pig. We think of zinc as primarily an enteric supporter, but as Dr. Tan showed us, zinc has direct antiviral effects in the respiratory system, as well as anti-inflammatory effects. And while COVID has created many challenges, it's not without opportunities. Dr. Tan did a great job of showing us that the zinc's being evaluated in the human respiratory disease model as a result of COVID. And I think that's one of many reasons for all of us to stay close to the zinc research going forward. And I applaud Zinpro for their approach to publication, and I urge them to continue that excellent work. I mean, that's how we learn. As Dr. Nick stated a couple of times, it's complicated, it's nuanced. If you want a simple answer, you're going to get a bad one, right? So please continue contributing to that body of evidence. Now, before we completely wrap up, I want to thank all of you in the audience for your participation. I really apologize to those of you who submitted questions we didn't get to, because you gave us more good questions than we had time for. I also want to thank Dr. Nick and Dr. Tan for your excellent presentations. Great job prepping, gentlemen, and I really appreciate the information you brought. And lastly, thank you to Zinpro and to the Swine colleagues for organizing this amazing event. Been my pleasure to be a part of it. Thanks to all of you for being with us today, and please have a great rest of your day.